feel the transition from being a chaplain, Episcopal chaplain at Boston University, to becoming Dean of St. Paul's Cathedral is very dizzying. Back at BU, I held worship services in a small chapel that would hold maybe 40 people. But at the cathedral, the capacity is 600, with room for another 100 in the balcony. Back at BU, the worship leaders were me and the organist. But at St. Paul's Cathedral, I'm a liturgical traffic cop. On Sunday mornings, I'm organizing a verger, a crucifer, 2 torchbearers, a subdeacon, a deacon, a dozen or so choir members, and often a bishop or 2, and a partridge in a pear tree. I've been a priest for 17 years, so I've learned to trust my instincts, to really feel what matters and what's important. But the cathedral is the bishop's church, and it's really under a lot of scrutiny with a lot of opinions offered. So I often feel as though I'm skating on thin ice. And I often wonder, is this the thing that I do that will make me an ex-dean? But I keep doing them. But the fact is, I love St. Paul's Cathedral. When it was dedicated in 1912, the bishop at that time said it would be a house of prayer for all people, quoting the prophet Isaiah. And his intention was that poor and destitute people would be welcome there. And in fact, that's the case. Homeless people feel at home in our space. And most of the regular worshipers on Sunday morning come from the poorer neighborhoods in Boston. So I wouldn't want to be any other place. It's a great place for me to be. So in 2000, at the end of the summer, when Ibrahim, the owner of the cafe next door, comes and asks if it might be possible for the Muslims who have to pray their obligatory prayers on Friday to pray somewhere in the cathedral, I say, of course. And I show him our fellowship hall downstairs. He's delighted because they've outgrown their previous space and this is much larger. Plus there's a place for them to store their prayer rigs. So shortly after our conversation, on Fridays, men be coming to practice their obligatory Friday prayers. All this happens while the current bishop is away. But he discovers our new guest as he's showing a very important layperson around the building. They come downstairs and see these people, and she says to him, Tom, who are these people? And what are they doing here? He says, I don't know. She says, aren't you the bishop? Isn't this your church? How come you don't know? He says, well, I'm going to find out. So he goes upstairs and talks to the receptionist, who says that they're Muslim men who come every Friday for their prayers. Well, why are they here? He says. Who gave them permission? Jep did, she says. I'm in my office, upstairs, at my desk, minding my own business. The bishop comes in and closes the door behind him. In my experience, never a good sign. He says, he's clearly upset, and I start to feel anxious. He says, I was just down in Sprout Hall, and it's filled with men praying, and Iselina told me that they were Muslims, and they come here on Fridays to pray, and that you gave them permission. Why did you do that? I look at him and I say, Tom, we say we're a house of prayer for all people. That's either true or it isn't. He pauses and then he says, okay, just checking. So he leaves, and for the next several months it's no big deal. I get occasional questions, but no one's really concerned. Things aren't that big of a deal until about a year later on 9/11. That week is so horrifying and it feels so crazy. Right after the attacks, we began to organize a worship service for noonday, because cathedrals are often a place of refuge for people to come in times of crisis. We wanted to provide a place for people to come, to pray, to connect with one another and share their fears. After the service, I find myself hugging a very large, bearded young man who's sobbing. He says, what's happening to our country? Why did all these people die? I have no honest answer for him. But his questions loom because the very next morning I have to tape a sermon for our radio broadcast. And somehow in less than 24 hours I have to find something to say that the 15,000 listeners on Sunday morning will find comfort and solace. I also realized we need to change our Sunday worship, what we plan, because it's not going to fit anymore. I feel so puny and inadequate in the face of this horror. And it takes me a day before I remember the Muslims who will be coming on Friday. Or will they? I contact Ibrahim and tell him that I want to welcome them. It's important that they still come there. Would it be all right if I come and pray with them? He puts me in touch with Mahmoud, who's now organizing the service, and who's delighted to give me permission. So on Friday at noonday, I go downstairs. Mahmoud greets me. He is so grateful to see me. He thanks me again and again and again for coming. Tells me what an honor it is for them to host me. I take off my shoes and walk past all the men that are gathering on the prayer rugs. They put a chair for me up in the front, off to the side. And I sit down, and then I only then start to think about what I might say to them to welcome them. The week's been so crazy, I haven't had time to think. And then I start thinking about our Sunday worship in 2 days and whether what we planned will really help people. And then I realize I've got 2 days to tweak my sermon, the one that I wrote earlier in the week. All week long, it's been crazy, and I felt like a hamster on a wheel, and I'm still running. And then their prayers start. They're in Arabic, of course, and I don't understand a single thing they're saying. And it's an odd blessing. Because I'm not thinking about the content of what they're saying. Whether what they pray is different than what Christians pray, or do I believe in what they're saying, or maybe they're saying something that I could use on Sunday. None of that happens for me. I just feel the intensity and the sincerity of their prayers. And then I recall Mahmoud's warm welcome to me, how glad he was that I was there, and I realized that it probably doesn't matter what I tell them. My presence alone is enough. And so suddenly I quit worrying. I can be still. I can pray. For the first time all week, I'm freed from the responsibility of being a priest for other people, of trying to help them, make sense of this for them, find some words of comfort for them. The cathedral is a house of prayer for all people. And at that moment, it was a house of prayer for me. I was so grateful. Thank you.